Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to this presentation, which is entitled Wasting Less Food, Smart Mass Customization of Food Provision. It's presented by both Elliot, Woolley and Alessandro Simeone, and I'll leave it for you to decide who is who. And it's a collaboration between Loughborough University in the UK and Shantou University in China. We've a lot to get through, so a brief overview. We'll take a quick look at UK food waste, particularly household food waste, and then we'll look at the development of a product service system to reduce the levels of household food waste generated. There are two tools which I want to describe: inventory management and recipe suggestion, and then we'll take a look at a cloud platform and optimization engine which can run these two tools. We'll take a quick look at results from two case studies, and then a quick description of continuing work. So it may or may not be a surprise to you that 1/3 of all the food grown in the world never actually enters somebody's mouth. It's lost either in the supply chain or at the consumer end of the supply. And it does depend on where you are in the world as to whereabouts in the supply chain the food is lost. Typically in the developed countries, it's lost towards the consumer end. And if we take the example of the UK, which is a reasonable example of a developed country, but for which we have lots of data on food waste across the supply chain, wonderfully provided by the Waste and Resources Action Programme, we can see that actually 6.6 million tonnes, some 70% of post-farm gate food waste is generated at the household level. And actually, interestingly, of this waste, again, about 70% or so is avoidable food waste, which means that at some point it was edible. So clearly quite a large proportion which could potentially be reduced. It's probably also interesting to note that household food waste has the highest environmental impact of all food waste because it has been through the whole supply system, generating carbon miles, storage, packaging, perhaps even cooked and prepared before ending up as plate waste. So if we take a look at the reasons why household food waste is generated, well, perhaps it occurs from 4 or 5 different stages. So clearly in the planning and purchasing of food is important. It may be that you're swayed by special offers in a store, buy one get one free, then you end up with 2 products and you only really need one. Perhaps you don't store food appropriately, or perhaps don't understand how long you've got left before food might go past its best or past the point at which it's edible. Perhaps you prepare or cook too much, or you cook some food and you decide you don't like it. So the whole range of reasons that we really need to kind of understand as to why food is generated. But I think too long, household food waste has been generated on consumers, on the household, and in fact it's probably really a symptom of a larger problem, a systematic problem related to supply. And if we take a look at a food manufacturer, you know, they buy raw ingredients, they understand what ingredients they have, the inventory, they put them through a whole series of manufacturing processes of which they are experts, and they produce some high quality food products and, you know, some waste. Those food products then go through to consumer, who effectively purchase them as their inventory, puts them through a whole series of cooking processes, which they may or may not be skilled at, and generate some meals and typically generate a larger proportion of waste. So really, the consumers look like micro manufacturers. The difference between the manufacturers and the consumers is that the manufacturers are very well skilled, they have lots of tools, they understand their processes, and the consumers a little bit less so. So really what we want to do is try and create the same level of control, of management that manufacturers have for the consumers. And really in this research what we're trying to do is bring the consumers into the management system of the food supply, with a hope that this will help reduce household food waste. So the way that we've been doing this in our research is to develop a product service system. So a product service system is a combination of a product and a service which a consumer will buy, and there's obviously some value in the service delivery. So typically this would be some support when we're thinking about household food. The support would be in managing your supply and the ingredients basically that you have. And we've been through a 5-stage development process. Unfortunately, we don't really have time to go through each of these in detail, but essentially what we've done is identified some of the issues with the food provisioning system, identified a number of general concepts that could be used to form a product service system, developed this product service system through a number of stages, and then gone through an assessment process. And what I want to talk to you about now is 2 particular tools which we have developed. One of them is an inventory management tool, and the other one is a recipe suggestion tool, all part of this larger product service system. The inventory management tool really could be run via a smart system, which enables, when food is purchased, for the data relating to that food to be recorded and accessible to the consumer. So they would have the type of food purchased, the amount, the date it was purchased, but also things like the use by or best before dates, which then gives somebody a good control or good visibility about the food that they have in stock within their homes, in their cupboards, in their pantries, in their refrigerators, and also gives them alerts as to when food might be coming out of date. The other part of the system is a recipe suggestion tool. Now, this uses the inventory management to understand the food that you have and the potential recipes which you could cook from these, also linking it to commerce systems, allowing you to make purchases for ingredients that you don't have to make those recipes. The key thing here is that when you make new purchases, you're purchasing ingredients for specific recipes that you'll know you're going to use, rather than just buying ingredients and trying to work out what meals you're going to cook at a later date.
Right. The proposed cloud platform has a modular structure, accessible from a graphic user interface which allows to input the stock list and to retrieve the recipe recommendations. A database of recipes is connected to the internet for a continuous update. The optimization module is composed of 2 computational engines, namely the search and match engine and the solution generation engine, and their output will be then fed into a decision-making support module which will enable the computation of relevant key performance indicator and output a recommended purchase list. Specifically, the system requires the definition of the minimum quantities in which food items can be purchased. As regards the search and match module, the system performs the computation of all the possible permutations, so sequences, of a number of recipes to be prepared during the week, including the required ingredients and consequently the items to be purchased. The solution generation module then computes the food item's availability as a Boolean variable by taking into account the expiry dates. At this point, the platform verifies the recipe sequence feasibility according to the availability of a given food item on a specific day. For the feasible recipe sequences, the system will then compute the daily use, daily leftover which can still be utilized, and the daily amount of waste represented by the food items which are going to expire on that specific day and have not been used yet. As regards the decision-making support module, this is responsible for the computation of 4 key performance indicators, namely the items to be purchased, the amount of food being used, the amount of food waste, and finally the leftover remaining in the inventory. To illustrate the proposed framework, a simulated case study is reported in this presentation based on a number of simplifying assumptions. Specifically, 1 meal per day is considered here for 2 people. Users have no specific preferences for any type of food. New food items are bought only once at the end of the week and will not expire for the next 7 days. Moreover, there is no similarity or interchangeability among the products, so all the products are unique. A typical stock list data specimen includes a code, the item name, along with the units and all the expired dates as reported in this table on the right side of the slide. The simulated case study includes 10 recipes. The table on the right shows how, for a single recipe, the system requires the bill of ingredients, quantities, and units. 10 recipes for 7 days yield to more than 600,000 possible sequences, possible permutations. If on one hand the conversion from the unit to mass is relatively easy, on the other hand the specific databases are required to compute the carbon footprint or other environmental impact indicators. At the current stage of research, the development of the simulated case study produced two types of results, represented by these two charts on this slide. Such results can be visualized as the amount of waste food items for any recipe sequences, as we can see on the left side of the screen, as well as the number of leftover food items from new purchases for any feasible sequence. This includes both food held in the inventory and wasted food. Given the extremely high number of sequences, more refined algorithms will be required to perform a more efficient optimization.
We have also undertaken a manual implementation of the tools, and for this particular case study we used an example of a household of one person eating one main meal per day for a period of 4 weeks. We used the baseline data provided by CIrpe in 2012, and the recipes were manually selected from an online database. Expiry dates and minimum order quantities were taken from in-store research. If I can just show you the data, so on the left-hand side we have a plot of the average amount of waste generated for different categories of food over the 4-week period. The CIrpe data is in blue, that's the baseline data, and our data is represented in orange. And we can see generally there was a reduction in the amount of food waste with just one anomaly, which is on the meat and fish. More interestingly, if we look at the plots on the right-hand side, we'll see that the amount of new purchases in grams each week actually reduced over the investigation period, but also the amount of inventory held in stock from 1 week to the next increased. So what the system naturally does is builds up an inventory and uses this to identify the recipes which can be produced. Of course, because there's a larger inventory, there's less amount of food that needs to be purchased, and we found this led to less waste. So the system seems very good, but there's clearly more work to be done. So we need to identify ways in which we can incorporate issues such as dietary requirements, changing social calendars, perhaps even excesses or shortages in food supply from the supply chain into the system. We need to obviously link it with multiple e-commerce systems, hopefully bringing different retailers together through one system, and then embed into our planning, purchasing, storing, preparation, and leftover management activities, which are of course dictated by the larger product service system that we've developed. So briefly then, to conclude, household food waste is a particular issue. We've identified that really it's a system problem and not a necessarily household problem, and therefore we need a system solution. So we've developed this product service system which has these two tools, inventory management and recipe suggestion, and we've been able to implement these using artificial intelligence to optimize the selection and recipe process, but also we've been able to demonstrate it in a manual system with some very interesting and positive results. Of course, there is further work, particularly linking it to commerce systems. Thank you very much for your attention, and we'll take any questions.